I didn't notice it right away. That's probably the part that stays with me the most. You imagine importance fading loudly. You imagine distance arriving with arguments or tension or some unmistakable moment where something breaks and both people feel it at the same time. But nothing broke. If anything, life kept working exactly the way it always had, which made it harder to understand why I slowly started feeling unnecessary, not unwanted. That would have been clearer, just less important. And there's a difference I didn't understand then. We met in a way that felt ordinary enough that I almost forget the beginning sometimes. A friend's birthday dinner. One of those long restaurant tables where conversations overlap and nobody hears everything being said. I remember arriving late and taking the only empty seat left, which happened to be next to her. She moved her glass so I'd have room. Small gesture. I noticed it anyway. We didn't talk much at first. Just occasional comments about the food, the noise, how crowded the place felt. But later, when people started leaving in small groups, we ended up outside at the same time. Cold air, streetlights, that strange quiet that comes after too many voices. She asked if I lived nearby. I said yeah. She said she did too. So we walked. Conversation came easily in a way that felt accidental. No performance. No effort to impress. I didn't feel like I needed to be interesting. That stood out. I remember going home that night feeling calm instead of excited, which, at the time, felt safer than excitement ever had. In the beginning, she wanted to know everything. Not dramatically, just naturally curious. What I did during the day. What music I listened to when I couldn't sleep. Why I stopped talking sometimes mid-sentence when I was thinking. She noticed pauses. That mattered more than compliments ever did. I'd mention something small once, and weeks later, she'd bring it up again. How did that thing with your coworker turn out? I'd forgotten I even told her. Being remembered like that feels intimate in a quiet way. Like proof you exist somewhere outside your own head. I started telling her things automatically. Not important things. Just thoughts. Observations. Things I didn't even realize I wanted to share until I heard myself saying them. And she did the same. Her day unfolded toward me in real time. Messages during lunch. Calls during traffic. Half-finished stories told while brushing her teeth. Nothing urgent. That was the point. I was where her thoughts landed first. We moved in together after about a year and a half. It felt practical more than romantic. We were already together constantly. 2 apartments felt unnecessary. The place wasn't special. Thin walls. A kitchen too small for both of us at once. A couch we bought secondhand and kept promising to replace. Life arranged itself quickly. Groceries on Sundays. Dinner around the same time every night. Falling asleep halfway through shows neither of us really followed. I remember thinking how stable everything felt. No guessing. No emotional volatility. No fear that something might disappear overnight. I thought stability meant success. I thought calm meant permanence. Looking back now, I think calm sometimes hides change better than chaos ever could. Nothing obvious shifted at first. That's important. There wasn't distance. Just less immediacy. She stopped texting me small things during the day. At first I barely noticed. Instead of hearing about something when it happened, I'd hear about it later. Oh yeah, something funny happened this morning. Morning used to mean immediately. Now it meant hours ago. I told myself people get busy. Relationships settle. That explanation made sense. Until I realized I was learning about her life the way acquaintances do. After everything had already happened, we still spent time together. Still laughed. Still said, "Love you," before leaving the apartment. From the outside, nothing looked different. But evenings changed in ways that were hard to name. We sat together more quietly. Phones appearing between conversations. Silence no longer shared, just simultaneous. I remember one night noticing we hadn't interrupted each other once. She used to stop mid-show to tell me something random. A memory. A thought. Something completely unrelated. Those interruptions disappeared. And I didn't understand yet why that mattered. Interruptions mean someone thinks of you before finishing their thought. You become part of their internal process. When that stops, closeness changes shape. I adapted faster than I realized. That part still bothers me. I stopped sending small things too. Stop calling just to talk. You mirror emotional rhythm without deciding to. If someone shares less, eventually you do the same. Not resentment. Adjustment. We became efficient partners. Bills paid. Plans coordinated. Kind to each other. Careful not to create conflict. Everything worked. Except something invisible had gone quiet. The realization came on an ordinary Tuesday. I came home early. The apartment was empty. I stood there longer than necessary, keys still in my hand. And a thought appeared without warning. If she didn't come home tonight, my evening would still look mostly the same. I hated that thought immediately, but I couldn't unthink it. It wasn't relief. It wasn't sadness. Just neutrality. And neutrality scared me more than anger would have, because it meant my presence wasn't essential anymore. And maybe hers wasn't either. After that, I noticed things differently. How easily plans changed without discussion. How little curiosity we showed about each other's days. How silence stretched comfortably but without connection. We weren't unhappy. We were functioning, like two lives running parallel instead of intertwined. I thought about saying something many times. But what do you say? I feel less important sounds childish. Unreasonable. Nothing was technically wrong. So I stayed quiet. She did too. Eventually she said it first. We were folding laundry. Completely ordinary moment. I feel like we're distant lately. Relief hit me before sadness. Because I wasn't imagining it. We talked calmly. No accusations. No raised voices. Just two people trying to describe absence. Neither of us knew when it started. Neither of us knew how to reverse it. And maybe that was the hardest part. There was nothing to fix. Only something already gone. She moved out gradually. Boxes leaving over weekends. Each trip lighter emotionally than I expected. The last day we hugged at the door. Long enough to acknowledge history. Short enough to accept reality. No drama. Just exhaustion. Afterward, life continued almost unchanged. That surprised me most. I expected devastation. Instead, I felt recognition. I realized I'd been grieving long before the breakup happened. What I missed wasn't her presence near the end. I missed being someone who mattered instinctively. Someone included automatically. For months, I caught myself reaching for my phone. Something small would happen. A joke. A strange moment. A passing thought. And I'd want to tell her. Not because I wanted her back. Because she used to be where those thoughts belonged. Eventually that reflex faded. Quietly. No ceremony. And that's when acceptance really arrived. Not when we separated. When sharing stopped feeling natural. I don't think either of us replaced the other. Life just reorganized. Friends filled conversations. Routines expanded. New habits formed. Importance didn't end dramatically. It dissolved. And realizing how gently that can happen changed something in me. Now I notice small things differently. When someone asks follow-up questions. When they remember details. When conversation wanders without purpose. Curiosity feels louder now. Because I know what its absence feels like. I was still there near the end. Still kind. Still present. Still loving in the ways I understood. But importance isn't measured by presence alone. It lives in attention. In instinct. In being the person someone thinks of first. And somewhere along the way, I wasn't that person anymore. Not suddenly. Not intentionally. Just gradually. Quietly. Until one day, everything still worked. And I understood I had already become optional. I was still there. Just not important anymore. And strangely, that realization didn't break me. It just stayed. Softly. Like something understood too late to change. But clear enough that I can't forget it now. For a while after that, I kept wondering if importance ever really disappears, or if it just moves somewhere else without telling you. That question stayed with me longer than the breakup itself. Because when something ends loudly, you know how to react. You grieve. You explain it to people. You build a story around what happened. But when nothing dramatic occurs, there's no clear emotion to hold on to. You just keep living. And slowly realize something inside your life has already rearranged itself. I remember the first few weeks alone feeling almost organized. That's the word that comes closest. The apartment stayed clean longer. Mornings followed predictable rhythms. I didn't have to coordinate schedules or negotiate small preferences anymore. At first, that felt like relief, which made me uncomfortable. Because relief isn't an emotion you expect after losing someone you loved. I kept waiting for sadness to correct me, for grief to arrive properly. But instead, what came was awareness. I started noticing how much of my attention used to orbit another person. Not in an unhealthy way, just naturally. I used to think in plural without realizing it. Should we cook tonight? Maybe we should watch something. I'll tell her about this later. After she left, those sentences disappeared, and thinking returned to singular form. I didn't realize how lonely independence can feel at first. Not painful, just quieter. There were moments when memory would catch me off guard. Standing in a grocery store aisle, reaching automatically for something she liked. Hearing a song in the car and instinctively forming a comment meant for someone else. turning slightly when something funny happened, expecting another reaction beside mine. Those reflexes lasted longer than emotions did, which made me understand something strange. Attachment isn't just love. It's habit layered over time, and habits fade slowly. One evening stands out. I came home after work, dropped my keys on the counter, and realized no one knew I was home. That sounds obvious now. Of course no one knew. But for years, arrival had meant acknowledgement. A voice from another room. A casual hey, movement somewhere nearby. That night there was nothing. Just silence accepting my presence without reacting to it. I stood there longer than necessary. Not sad. Just aware of how invisible ordinary existence can feel when no one is tracking it alongside you. And I think that's when another realization formed. I hadn't only lost her attention. I had stopped expecting it. I began thinking about the end differently after that. Not as something caused. More like something completed. We didn't fall apart. We finished something without noticing. Two people slowly becoming self-contained again. I used to believe love created permanence. That once two lives intertwined deeply enough, separation would always feel catastrophic. But permanence, I learned, depends on continued attention. Not history. Not compatibility. Attention. And attention drifts unless someone keeps choosing it. Months passed. Life expanded quietly. I reconnected with friends I'd unintentionally neglected. Stayed longer in conversations. Allowed plans to form spontaneously again. Nothing dramatic changed. But I felt movement returning. Curiosity about people. About experiences. About myself. Near the end of our relationship, I hadn't noticed how little curiosity I felt anymore. Everything had already been known. Predicted. Understood. And understanding, strangely, can become its own kind of distance. Sometimes I wondered if she felt the same relief mixed with sadness. If she noticed the same calm afterward. If she also realized we had both been staying out of habit more than connection. I never asked. Some questions stop needing answers once enough time passes. Not because they lose importance. Because understanding replaces urgency. I saw her once again nearly a year later. Completely accidental. A cafe neither of us used to visit. We smiled. Talked easily. Asked polite questions about work and life. There was warmth. But no gravity pulling us back together. And during that conversation, I noticed something quietly definitive. I didn't feel the need to tell her anything afterward. No unfinished thought waiting for later. No instinct to continue the interaction beyond that moment. We were present only in the present. Nothing extending forward. And that felt complete. Walking home afterward, I realized something I hadn't been able to articulate before. Importance isn't lost all at once. It fades when two people stop orienting their inner lives toward each other. You can still care. Still respect. Still wish someone well. But without shared attention, closeness becomes memory. Not failure. Just transition. These days, I notice small things more carefully. When someone remembers something insignificant I mentioned weeks ago. When conversation drifts naturally instead of ending efficiently. When someone interrupts themselves just to share a thought. Those moments feel louder now. Because I understand what they mean. They mean inclusion. They mean presence. They mean, for now, you matter inside someone else's ongoing awareness. I don't think I was ever truly replaced. And she wasn't either. Life simply continued reshaping itself around absence. Which is what life always does. That realization used to feel unsettling. Now it feels honest. Sometimes, late at night, I still catch myself forming sentences meant for someone else. Observations with no destination yet. And instead of feeling lonely, I feel something closer to patience. Because the instinct to share hasn't disappeared. It just doesn't have a listener right now. And maybe that's okay. Maybe importance isn't something you secure forever. Maybe it's something renewed quietly, day after day, through attention, through curiosity, through choosing to keep someone included in ordinary moments. I was still there at the end, still showing up, still caring in ways that made sense to me. But presence alone isn't what makes someone essential. Being thought of is, being reached for, being included before anyone else. And somewhere along the way, we stopped reaching, not angrily, not intentionally, just gradually, until everything felt peaceful, and I understood that peace can sometimes mean distance has already won. I was still there, just not important anymore. And now, when I think about it, I don't feel bitterness, only recognition. How quietly a person can move from central to familiar to memory. while life continues exactly as it always has, almost gently, almost unnoticed, until there's nothing left to say about it, and you simply sit with the understanding that you mattered once, deeply, and then, slowly, less. After that realization settled in, I stopped trying to frame the story as something tragic. For a while, I needed it to be tragic. It felt easier that way. If something dramatic had happened, I could have pointed to it, explained it to friends, built a clean narrative around loss. But nothing clean existed, just gradual adjustment. And adjustment doesn't give you permission to grieve in obvious ways. So instead, I carried this quiet confusion for months. I kept asking myself the same question in slightly different forms. When do you stop being important to someone? Not loved, not respected, important. Those aren't the same thing. I remember noticing it most in how we occupied space near the end. We still moved around each other carefully, still asked if the other needed anything from the store, still shared meals. But our attention no longer leaned inward. It rested elsewhere. Sometimes she'd laugh at something on her phone, and I wouldn't ask what it was. Not because I didn't care, because the instinct to enter that moment had faded. And she stopped offering explanations automatically too. We gave each other privacy so generously that eventually there was nothing shared left to protect. At the time, it felt mature. Now I think it was distance learning how to look polite. One night, weeks before we admitted anything out loud, I woke up unexpectedly. The apartment was dark except for light coming from the living room. She was awake, sitting on the couch, scrolling, completely absorbed. I stood in the hallway watching for a second before she noticed me. She smiled, softly. Couldn't sleep, she said. I nodded, got water, went back to bed. Nothing unusual happened. But lying there afterward, I realized I hadn't wondered what she was thinking about. And she hadn't invited me into it either. We were sharing a home without sharing interior space anymore. That thought stayed with me long after. I think people imagine emotional distance feels cold. It doesn't. It feels neutral, comfortable enough to ignore. You still function well together, still cooperate, still care in practical ways, which makes leaving feel almost irrational. Why in something that works? That question trapped me longer than love did, because nothing justified departure except a feeling too subtle to defend. After she moved out, time passed strangely. Days felt normal. Weeks disappeared quickly. I wasn't rebuilding myself dramatically. I was just continuing. And gradually, something returned that I hadn't noticed missing. Anticipation. I started looking forward to conversations again. Not specific people, just conversation itself. Near the end with her, talking had become predictable, efficient, safe. Now unpredictability felt alive again. Someone asking an unexpected question. A discussion wandering without purpose. Moments that didn't need resolution. I realized how long it had been since interaction felt exploratory instead of confirmatory. There was a moment months later that clarified everything more than the breakup ever had. I was having dinner with friends. Nothing serious, just casual conversation. At one point, I started telling a story and someone interrupted with a question. A real one. Curious. Engaged. And I felt something shift instantly. Energy. The feeling of being actively received. It startled me how unfamiliar that sensation had become. Not because she had stopped caring, but because curiosity between us had quietly expired. And without curiosity, importance fades. You become known, then predictable, then background. I don't think either of us chose that outcome. Humans naturally settle into certainty. Certainty feels safe. But certainty removes discovery. And discovery is what keeps people central to each other's lives. Without discovery, connection survives only through habit. Habit lasts longer than passion, but eventually even habit loosens. Sometimes I replay earlier memories now, not searching for mistakes, but noticing emotional movement. At the beginning, everything felt unfinished. We were constantly learning each other, asking, guessing, correcting assumptions. Later, everything felt completed. We already knew how conversations would go, how reactions would sound, what opinions would follow. There was nothing left to uncover. And maybe that's when importance quietly shifts. When someone stops being surprising. I don't blame us anymore. That part took time. For a while I wondered if I should have fought harder, spoken sooner, demanded attention. But attention requested isn't the same as attention freely given. And forcing curiosity only reveals its absence. We didn't fail. We just stopped renewing something that requires renewal. Now, When I meet someone new, I notice smaller signals. Do they remember unfinished thoughts? Do they return to topics days later? Do conversations feel open-ended? Those things matter more to me than chemistry now. Because importance isn't built through intensity. It's built through continued noticing, through choosing someone again in ordinary moments. I don't fear being replaceable anymore. That fear softened into understanding. Everyone is replaceable in the structure of daily life. Jobs change. Routines adapt. People move forward. What isn't replaceable is shared attention while it exists. And maybe that's enough. Maybe permanence was never the point. Sometimes, late at night, I think about how quietly our relationship ended. No final argument. No decisive goodbye. Just two people gradually becoming less necessary to each other's internal worlds. And strangely, that gentleness feels fitting now. Because love didn't vanish. It just stopped being active. Stopped moving. Stopped reaching. I was still there. Still loving in familiar ways. Still present. But presence without curiosity slowly turns invisible. And invisibility doesn't hurt immediately. It settles in over time. Until one day you realize you've already adjusted to being peripheral. These days, when someone texts me something small, a complaint, a random observation, a thought that goes nowhere, I notice the weight of it. Because small things mean you came to mind first. They mean, at least for now, you're important inside someone else's ongoing day. And I try not to take that lightly anymore. I don't know if relationships always end this way. Quietly, gradually, without blame. But I know ours did. And maybe understanding arrived exactly when it was supposed to. Not during the ending. After. When memory finally slowed enough to see the pattern clearly. I was still there. Right until the end. Just no longer central. No longer necessary. No longer the person her thoughts reached for automatically. And life didn't collapse because of that. It simply continued. Which, in its own way, was the hardest part to accept. Because it meant importance isn't proven by how much someone once loved you, but by whether they keep turning toward you while nothing requires them to. And eventually, we stopped turning. Quietly. Naturally. Almost kindly. Until all that remained was understanding. And the awareness that sometimes you don't lose someone all at once. You just stop being important in the way you used to be. And one day, you finally notice.